Hey everyone, this is Bridget, and today we're going to be talking about a topic you might not heard much about, which is something that is really helpful on the awakening journey and healing ourselves, which is actually birth trauma, or rebirthing ourselves from different challenges that might come up around birth. Because oftentimes we can hear about, say, like inner child trauma, or different kinds of trauma throughout our lives, but this one is hidden. And this one's kind of unconscious, and so it's often not talked about as much because it's so deep in our psyche and our energetic fields that sometimes it's hard to kind of unearth and bring up and heal, but it is tremendously impactful on us. And so I wanted to talk about my journey with this particular healing, which I talked about in my Heal Yourself video, because it was one of the biggest healings I've ever had. And so I wanted to share that with you guys so that you could take a look at it and see if this is something that's up for you. If it's not, that's fine too. But I just wanted to bring this to everyone's kind of awareness so we can understand our own energetics and some of the imprints that we might have, as well as why it's so important as many of us maybe start having children to do birth right. It's so important. And I have a really good friend in town that does amazing birth, and so I'll interview her so that you can understand a bit more about how we can birth, in a really healthy way that sets the template for our lives as incarnate souls here. So really significant. So let's get into it now. So I'm going to tell you my story, and as I tell you my story, I'm going to share different things that you can look into so that it can be related and apply to you. So one of the things that came up as I was doing a lot of healing work in my early 20s on myself was this energy around becoming unconscious at the end of different life patterns. So such things as like the end of a relationship, the end of a job, the end of some kind of activity or creative process. And in those moments, it was almost like I was drugged, like I would go unconscious. And I didn't quite understand why. For instance, I would say paint a painting, because I was doing a lot of painting and gallery artwork at that time. And I would paint the painting, but then I wouldn't paint the edges, and I wouldn't frame it, and I wouldn't sign it, and I wouldn't finish it. There was this finishing quality that didn't happen. And so I worked with one of my healers at the time, and she had done a lot of work around this rebirth, birth trauma energy, and she identified it as that. And so I was like, okay. And so I went, to my mom and figured out the story of what happened, because obviously I don't quite remember in my, memory mind, though the imprint is obviously in my etheric body and in much of my energy. And so one of the things that's quite interesting, and you're like, okay, well, what does this have to do with anything? So the patterns in which we go from conception, so the moment you were conceived, all the way through birth, is the template of the way that you begin, middle, and end things in your life. And so, for instance, if there's the energy in you that you were kind of like a mistake child at conception, right? And you weren't even meant to be here, then it might be hard to feel valuable to even start things or like projects, right? There's this energy of not being wanted, at the beginning, because when you were conceived, that wasn't, a conscious thought, and there might be this kind of mistake energy around it. So that's the beginning, say, like stage. And then each trimester has a different part of this template journey that is part of the cycle of these different, that then overlays these different aspects of your life, which is so freaking fascinating to me. So if there's all of a sudden like third trimester, your mom gets super stressed out and this issue happens, then it might be at that time in a relationship, a job, whatever that cycle is, creation process, that anxiety or fear or stress comes up in you because of that patterning. It's so deep and so subtle and so fascinating to me. Now, most people do pretty well, through that, conception to pregnancy phase, and it's usually birth, like the actual birth, that has the issue. And think about it, like if you're coming into this world with super birth challenges, then imagine as you're going through life attempting to birth things or complete things, what that's going to do, right? And there's many of us now, especially my generation and such, that, it was just common to get the drugs so that mom didn't feel as much, or get the spinal tap thing, which my mom got, and also, this is interesting too, just remember that, and also induced. So I was induced. It was an induced labor, which means that the doctors chose when I came in. I didn't choose. It wasn't my timing. And so that was another thing that had come up, is like wanting to do things in my own timing. And so that can come up as well. Now, realizing it, again, not kind of going into victim mode or fear or anything around this, it's more going, okay, but we also did choose the way that we were going to come in, and these certain templates to then heal and then rebalance. But there's a reason for it in our particular soul understanding and our own awakening. So going, okay, why is that, and how does timing work? And timing is a big part of my life theme in general. Even after I've healed this, timing is something is a deep theme that I'm exploring, for instance. So going back and asking your mom and asking your dad too, because there's also can be this thing, maybe your mom's doing great, but your dad's off drunk, or he was gone and she didn't feel supported, or these certain things that are happening also in the other energetic dynamics. So get the story of what happened for your birth from conception all the way till after birth, if there was anything that came up during that series. And then notice, if there isn't anything, don't dig it up. But notice if there is any kind of correlation between your life cycles and then this birth cycle. And then in that space, some of the things that you can do, because it is so buried, it's different, because I've done so much soul retrieval and inner child work with myself and with many different people. And that's easier because you can trigger those memories and then you can repattern it. But when it's a baby, it's a little bit different. And so different things like cranial sacral work, because it's working on the etheric body, is really, really helpful for this. Going deep and getting some kind of regression or some kind of trauma healing around this subject is very helpful. A helpful modality that I've seen, I did it through a different way, but that I've seen is through constellation work. I've done probably at least 20 constellations around these different patterns from conception to birth, and seeing what happened along the way. It might be something that your parents forgot, but it's there, right? Because it might have been unconscious in them. So going through and figuring out what your story is, and then figuring out a modality that really resonates with you, maybe doing some research, but through regression, through some kind of maybe constellation work, through cranial sacral, maybe even some Reiki, but going into it with that intention of really bringing and purifying this energy of your little baby self that had so many different imprints coming in and couldn't run away, right? It's like the baby's not running away in that womb. It's taking in all of that, and it's its first understanding of life here on earth. It's this intermediary realm. It's quite fascinating. And so looking into it is going to be really, really helpful as we look at our list of different things that we can heal and bring into wholeness. This is just another one that you can dive into and look into. Now, when it comes to the birth aspect of, okay, well, crap, a lot of these things happened along the way in these past couple generations because of hospitals, because of medicine and these certain things that brought this unconsciousness or distortion or challenges. And a lot of it maybe saved our life. Maybe that we really did need a C-section to live. Many cases we don't. So looking also then, as I will do this video coming up with my friend, into what are ways that we can really birth consciously and birth in a really healthy way. And I think even if you're not planning on having kids, or if you're already a mother, just understanding it as a human so that you can support other friends or family or people around you to understand that this is what's happening. Like when you maybe see a pregnant woman, that you can be like, sending some light, happy vibes to that baby, being like, wow, this is a really special imprinting time. And to understand that, of course, not be dogmatic and, throw a bunch of stuff down other people's throats that aren't open to it, but just understanding it. We don't see this as a species. We don't see birth. It's been hidden away. I mean, fathers, up until 20 years ago or something, weren't even allowed in the hospital. What? Like the husband, the other half there in that energetic, oxytocin bath, like what's going on here? So a few other details of what happened to me in this process are that, okay, I couldn't look people in the eyes. I didn't actually realize this until this particular healing process, that I didn't ever connect with my mom's eyes because she was drugged out for days. And so I didn't have that bonding process to that depth. And so one of the things that then happened is I could look some people in the eyes, but there was this uncomfortability because that initial connection wasn't there. And so that was pretty interesting. And so I went through this particular healing process that was like a trauma release rebirth process. In this, it usually entails some kind of massaging and moving of the body so that it feels like it is going through the birth canal, and then that triggers part of this memory to have the healing happen. And so I was going through you actually go back kind of through the womb, and it's not just a meditation. It's an actual physical, visceral process that's needed. Doing the meditation, I think, would be one layer of it, but it's an actual physical, energetic connection that is required for this to take place to the depth that it needs to. And so I moved, say, through the birth canal, having these experiences of the body being massaged, and then at the end, I then bonded with the healer, but it was really with my mom, and had that connection in the eyes. And I will tell you, I mean, I go really deep, when this stuff happens, and I was very available to it. But it literally changed my brain. It put me back in this state of when I was a baby. And honestly, my brain didn't work for about a month. No joke. It was reforming so many different pathways. And I was working at the ad agency at the time, and I was kind of a higher up, and so I was in a managerial position, so I could kind of get away with not being able to do stuff. But at that time, my dad actually kind of had to help me with things, because it was such a readjustment process. I'm not saying that's going to happen with you, but that's just what happened with me. And then I actually had to do a series of sound healings to bring my field back into balance and kind of restart my brain processing and energetic functioning again, because I had gone so deep in reprocessing this. And after that, all of the different kind of symptomology of my personal patterning had been completely reformulated. This idea of connecting with people, or the ability to finish things, or a certain level of timing and lack of rebellion around that. All of those things have finished and are complete, and I've changed. So it was really, really powerful and cool. And one of the reasons that my particular soul chose to have this experience was so that, because I didn't have that level of nurture and bond and love in my birth process, that's one of the things that then I seek to create for other people. So it's that's the idea of your trauma or your challenges become your medicine, or that thing that you strive to provide. And so that's one of the things that became clear, is that I then want to be that nurturing, kind of mother, and hold people in that space to the best of my ability, because that's something that I didn't have. And so then to be able to create it and share it with other people is really important to me. So that's how it came up for me. So it's something to just look at. It's something to be aware of. It's a very interesting subject. If you have any questions below, I'll do my best to answer. But I hope that you've enjoyed this and you've had some insights around this, or will look into it. And if you like videos like this, please like and subscribe. Be sure to check me out on Instagram for more daily updates. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.